The moment everything shifted. The evening lights of Los Angeles glowed soft and golden when Sandra Bullock walked into a crowded hall for a charity event. She had been smiling for the cameras, but deep inside, she felt uneasy. The whispers had started earlier that week, rumors in the press that cut too deep, twisting her personal struggles into cruel headlines. The room was filled with actors, journalists, and sponsors, all pretending to care more about the cause than about gossip. But Sandra knew how these nights worked. She could see the sharp eyes of reporters waiting for her to slip, waiting for a moment of weakness. As she stood near the stage, one question hit harder than the rest. A reporter's voice cut through the chatter, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sandra, some say you've lost your charm, that your time has passed. Do you think you're still worthy of standing here tonight?" The crowd went silent. Some shifted uncomfortably, some smirked, and some pulled out their phones to record. Sandra's smile faded. Her heart pounded, but she kept her head high. Still, the sting of those words was too strong to ignore. Before she could answer, another voice echoed from the side of the hall, calm, steady, and carrying the kind of weight that silences a room. "She is more than worthy," said Keanu Reeves, every head turned. Keanu stepped forward from the back wearing a simple black jacket, no attempt to shine more than anyone else. But it was his presence, calm, grounded, humble, that made people step aside as he walked toward Sandra. The reporter tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Keanu, we're just asking questions." "It's part of the job." Keanu stopped in the middle of the hall, his eyes fixed firmly on the reporter. "There's a difference between asking questions and trying to break someone's spirit," he said. His voice wasn't angry, but steady, almost protective. "If you think kindness is weakness, then maybe you've never truly seen strength." The silence deepened. The crowd leaned in, sensing something powerful unfolding. Sandra stood frozen, torn between gratitude and disbelief. For years she had handled her battles alone, keeping her guard up, never expecting anyone to step in. And now here was Keanu, defending her in front of the world. The reporter's smile faded. His words stumbled. I didn't mean—" But Keanu didn't let him finish. "You should remember," he said softly, "that respect is not a gift we give only when convenient. Respect is the ground we all stand on. Without it, no stage, no camera, no fame means anything." The hall erupted in quiet murmurs. Some people clapped, others wiped their eyes. It was not just what Keanu said. It was the way he said it. Gentle yet unshakable. Sandra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone under the weight of judgment. She glanced at Keanu, and he gave her the smallest nod, as if to say, "You don't have to fight this battle by yourself." But the night was not over. The reporter wasn't the only one with sharp words, and the event still had hours to go. Sandra knew this moment had shifted something deep in her heart. She just didn't know yet how far it would carry her, or how much it would change everything between her and Keanu. This was only the beginning. The night after Keanu spoke those words, the air in the hall changed. People no longer looked at Sandra the same way. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and guilt, as if realizing they had been too quick to judge. But Sandra herself was still unsettled. Even as the applause lingered, she felt a storm brewing inside her. She kept asking herself why Keanu had stepped in so strongly, why his words carried such weight, and why she felt her heart shift when he defended her. When the event resumed, the host tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but the energy of the room had already transformed. Reporters whispered among themselves, some embarrassed, some eager to twist the moment into headlines that would spark attention. A new question came from the far side of the hall, this time softer but still piercing. "Sandra, people say your best days are behind you. How do you respond to that?" The words hit her like another stone. She opened her mouth, but the weight of the crowd, the lights, and the tension froze her voice. She lowered her eyes, fighting to steady her breathing. Before she could answer, Keanu's voice cut through again, this time gentler but firm enough to command attention. "Her best days are not behind her," he said. "Her best days are the ones she creates every time she chooses kindness, even in a world that doesn't return it." And tonight is one of those days. The crowd stirred. A few people clapped again, louder this time. Some even stood up, sensing that something rare was happening. Sandra turned to look at him. Her eyes filled with something between relief and disbelief. She whispered, almost too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu leaned closer, his voice low enough for her alone. "Because I know what it feels like to be misunderstood. I won't let them do this to you." Those words stayed with her like a secret fire. For years, she had built walls around herself, always carrying her burdens alone. And here was Keanu, gently but firmly telling her she didn't have to. As the evening went on, the atmosphere grew more complicated. Some reporters, frustrated at losing control of the narrative, began asking sharper questions. One asked about her personal life, trying to drag out old wounds. Another questioned her relevance in the industry. Sandra tried to stay calm, but her heart beat faster with each attack. This time, Keanu didn't raise his voice. Instead, he walked to the stage. The hall went silent again as everyone watched him take the microphone. "You think relevance is measured by headlines or by trends?" he began. "But relevance is measured by the people you touch, the lives you change, the hope you bring. I've seen Sandra give more than most will ever know. When a crew member's child was sick, she covered the hospital bills quietly. When a struggling actress needed help, she opened her home. Those stories don't make the news because kindness doesn't sell. But I've seen them, and I won't let them be forgotten." Gasps filled the room. People exchanged glances, realizing they had never heard these stories. Sandra froze in shock. Her eyes welled with tears, not because of the attacks, but because Keanu had just revealed things she had tried so hard to keep private. She whispered again, her voice breaking, "Keanu, why would you share that?" He looked at her, his face calm, his tone steady. "Because the world needs to remember that kindness is not weakness. And because sometimes the truth needs a voice when it's being drowned by noise." The hall was no longer just an event. It felt like a turning point, a stage where the world had paused to witness something deeper than fame. But even as applause filled the hall again, Sandra felt uneasy. The night had given her a strange gift, support she had never expected. But it also left her with questions that burned inside her heart. Why did Keanu care so much? Why now? And what would it mean for both of them if he kept standing by her side? The event ended, but the story had only just begun. Outside the hall, the world of flashing cameras and breaking headlines waited eagerly. None of them knew that what had happened tonight would ripple far beyond gossip columns. It would set into motion something neither Sandra nor Keanu had fully prepared for. Something that would test their strength, their humility, and the quiet bond forming between them. As they stepped out into the night, side by side, the cameras flashed wildly. Sandra forced a smile, but her mind was still racing. Deep down, she felt both fear and comfort in equal measure. Fear of what the world would say tomorrow, but comfort knowing that for the first time in years, she wasn't standing alone. And somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Did you see the way he defended her?" That wasn't just words. The seed of a new story had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before the world demanded to see how it would grow. The next morning, the world was already awake with headlines. Every newspaper, every online platform, every gossip column had plastered pictures of Sandra and Keanu together. Flashes of the moment when he stood in her defense were everywhere, and each outlet twisted the story in its own way. Some called it an act of friendship. Others painted it as a love story, while a few bitter voices accused it of being staged for attention. Sandra sat by the window in her home, the early sunlight falling across her face, her phone buzzing nonstop. She had not slept much. Her mind kept replaying Keanu's words over and over, his calm voice saying, "I won't let them do this to you." It should have comforted her, but instead, it brought waves of conflict. She was grateful, yet also afraid of the storm his actions had stirred. She thought back to her years in Hollywood, where silence was often her shield. Never complain, never defend, never show weakness. That was the rule she had lived by. And yet Keanu had broken that silence in one night. Not for himself, but for her. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, Keanu stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee, dressed simply like he always was. He gave her a small smile. "I figured you didn't get much sleep either." She hesitated, then let him in. They sat quietly for a while, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Sandra asked, "Do you know what you've done? The world is already spinning stories about us. Keanu sipped his coffee calmly. Let them spin. People will always talk. What matters is what we know about ourselves. But you exposed things I wanted to keep private, she said softly, her voice heavy with emotion. You told them about the crew member, about the actress I helped. I never wanted credit. I just wanted to do what was right. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes steady. I know, that's why I said it. Because the world needs to be reminded that real kindness exists, and that it doesn't need an audience to be true. I didn't reveal those things for you to get applause. I revealed them so the noise around you would finally be balanced by truth. Her heart wavered at his words. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Deep inside, she knew he was right. Still, the fear lingered. And what if they twist this into something ugly? She whispered. Then let them, Keanu replied. Ugly words don't last. Truth does. Their silence stretched, filled with emotions neither could name. Sandra felt her eyes well with tears, not of pain this time, but of relief. For years, she had fought alone, but here was someone willing to share her battles. Not for fame, not for image, but because he truly cared. Later that afternoon, as the day unfolded, the backlash arrived. A talk show played clips of Keanu defending her, with hosts mocking the moment as overly dramatic. A journalist tweeted that Keanu was trying too hard to be the hero. Hashtags trended with both love and hate. The internet split in two. Sandra watched in silence, her chest tightening. But when she glanced at Keanu, sitting quietly beside her, she saw no anger in his face. Only calm resolve. Doesn't this bother you? She asked. He turned to her, his expression soft. I've lived long enough to know that people will always find reasons to laugh at what they don't understand. But if even one person out there feels less alone because of what we did last night, then it's worth it. His words hit her like a steady flame, warming the cold edges of her fear. That evening, another unexpected twist came. A letter arrived at Sandra's home, delivered by hand. It was from the family of the crew member whose hospital bills she had secretly paid years ago. They wrote, We never forgot what you did for us. Last night when Keanu spoke, we cried because someone finally told the world what we couldn't. Thank you for saving our child. Thank you for being you. Sandra read the letter aloud, her voice trembling. Tears fell silently down her face. Keanu listened quietly, his gaze steady on her, as if to remind her that she no longer needed to carry her kindness in the shadows alone. But even as gratitude filled her heart, she knew the storm outside was growing louder. The world wasn't done with them yet. The media smelled blood and glory, and they would not let this story fade easily. Keanu, however, seemed ready for whatever would come. And for the first time in years, Sandra felt the tiniest spark of courage, because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. And deep within her heart, though she didn't want to admit it yet, a question began to bloom. Why was he willing to fight for her this way? What did it mean for both of them? The answer, she knew, was waiting just beyond the horizon, and the world would soon see it unfold. The days that followed felt like walking through fire. What began as a single moment of Keanu stepping forward had now become a storm, sweeping across the world. Everywhere they turned, there were headlines, cameras, and voices eager to twist their story into something it was not. For Sandra, the weight was familiar, but this time it cut deeper because someone else was being dragged into it. Keanu. Articles called him the knight who needed attention. TV hosts joked about him playing the savior in real life. One tabloid even wrote, Is Keanu Reeves secretly in love with Sandra, or is this all a publicity trick? Sandra read those words in silence, her hands trembling. She felt a surge of guilt. She had carried scandals before, but now her pain was pulling Keanu into battles he never asked for. One afternoon, they walked into a press conference for a project they were both supporting. The hall was overflowing with reporters, cameras flashing like a storm of lightning. Sandra had hoped it would focus on the charity, but the first question shattered that hope. A reporter stood, microphone in hand, eyes sharp. Keanu, are you trying to revive Sandra's career by defending her? Some say you've sacrificed your own reputation just to protect her. Do you regret what you said that night? The hall grew quiet, all eyes fixed on him. Sandra's heart sank. She wanted to step in to stop him from carrying her burden. But before she could move, Keanu rose from his chair. He looked straight at the reporter, his face calm, his voice steady. "Regret?" he repeated. "No, I don't regret speaking the truth. Not then, not now, not ever." The room stirred. Cameras zoomed closer. Keanu continued, his tone sharper but still controlled. "The problem isn't with Sandra. The problem is with a world that feeds on tearing people down instead of lifting them up. If you think defending a friend, standing for respect, and reminding people of kindness is something to regret, then maybe you should ask yourself what you regret when you go home at night." The hall froze. The reporter's confidence cracked. Another tried to jump in, eager for confrontation. "But Keanu, don't you think you're risking your own image? Your silence has always been your strength, and now you're putting it all on the line for her." Keanu turned his gaze toward the second reporter. His answer came slowly, each word carrying weight. "My image is not what matters. I don't care about being remembered as the man who stayed quiet while someone was being broken down. I care about being remembered as someone who stood up when it mattered. If that costs me, then let it cost me." Sandra's breath caught. She had always admired his humility, but now she saw something else in him, an unshakable courage, a willingness to put everything at risk for the sake of what he believed in. The crowd buzzed with whispers, but Keanu wasn't done. "You all write about fame, about careers, about scandals, but you forget the human part of it. You forget the pain your words cause. Do you know how many lives are shaped by careless questions? How many hearts are crushed because someone wanted a headline? Sandra is not a story for you to twist. She is a human being, and she deserves the respect you expect for yourselves." The hall erupted into stunned silence. Even the flashes of cameras slowed, as if the photographers themselves were hesitant to capture the moment. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to say something, but her voice failed her. All she could do was look at him, silently asking why he was willing to carry so much for her. After the conference, they slipped into a quiet corridor, away from the noise. Sandra finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to risk yourself for me." Keanu stopped, turning to face her. His expression softened. "Yes, I did. Because silence allows cruelty to grow. I've seen what silence does to people, Sandra. I won't stand by and watch it happen to you." Her eyes searched his, trying to understand. "But why me?" she whispered. He hesitated, the words heavy in his chest. Then, slowly, he answered, "Because I know you. I know your heart. I know the good you've done when no one was watching. And if the world can't see that, then I'll make sure they do." Her breath shook as she took in his words. No one had ever defended her this way. Not for a role, not for publicity, not for their own gain. This was different. It was raw, it was real, and it was terrifying in its honesty. That night, the internet exploded again, but this time something new happened. Ordinary people began sharing their own stories. Stories of how Sandra's movies had lifted them during hard times, or how Keanu's quiet kindness had touched lives in ways never spoken about. Hashtags shifted from hate to hope, yet behind the light of those posts, Sandra felt the pull of something she could no longer ignore. Keanu's words were not just defense. They were a mirror, reflecting the truth she had hidden from herself. She wasn't broken. She wasn't finished. And maybe, just maybe, her best days weren't behind her after all. But with this new wave of attention came a new kind of danger. People who had once dismissed her now wanted to use her, to ride the storm for their own benefit. And Sandra knew that the hardest tests were still ahead. She looked at Keanu, who sat quietly beside her in the car as they drove away from the chaos, his face calm, his presence steady, and she whispered a silent thought she dared not say aloud. What if his words changed not just the world's view of me, but my view of him? The following week felt heavier than the one before. Sandra had grown used to seeing her face in the news, but now every headline carried Keanu's name too. The two of them were no longer individuals in the public eye. They had been bound together by the storm. And while the world was fascinated, the cost was quietly eating away at her peace. She sat alone in her living room late at night, the curtains closed, her phone lighting up with endless notifications. Every scroll revealed another article, another opinion, another stranger dissecting her life. Some posts praised Keanu's courage, calling him the only person brave enough to stand for her. But others twisted the story, accusing Sandra of hiding behind him, as if she were weak, as if she were letting him fight her battles for her. Her chest tightened at those words. She whispered to herself, "Am I really that fragile? Have I forgotten how to stand on my own?" A knock at her door startled her. When she opened it, Keanu stood there holding a small bag of takeout food. He gave her a simple smile. "Thought you might need dinner. Figured you wouldn't cook tonight." Sandra let out a shaky laugh. "You're starting to know me too well." They sat together on the couch, eating in silence for a while. Finally, she broke the quiet. "Keanu, do you realize what they're saying about me now? They think I'm hiding behind you. They think I'm weak." He set down his food and turned to her, his eyes calm but steady. "You're not weak, Sandra. They say that because they don't know your story, but I do. I've seen you fight battles most people would have given up on. Weakness isn't what brought you here. Resilience did." She looked at him, her throat tight. "Then why does it feel like I'm breaking again?" He leaned back, his voice softer now. "Because you've carried too much alone. Even the strongest people break when they're never allowed to rest. Sometimes strength is not fighting alone, it's letting someone stand beside you." Her eyes stung with tears. She tried to blink them away, but one slipped down her cheek. Keanu reached out, gently brushing it aside with his thumb. The touch was simple, but it carried the weight of unspoken trust. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. A message from her manager. "Someone from your past is speaking to the press. Says they know the real Sandra." Her heart sank. She opened the link attached. On the screen was a man she hadn't seen in years. A former colleague who had once been close to her but had turned bitter when his own career failed. He was sitting on a talk show smirking as he spoke. "Sandra Bullock isn't what she seems," he said. "People think she's kind, but she hides behind others. Now she's hiding behind Keanu Reeves. He's the hero. She's just the shadow." Sandra's hands trembled as she dropped the phone onto the couch. The words cut deeper than the public headlines because they came from someone who once knew her, someone who once shared her trust. "They're using him against me now," she whispered. "They're trying to turn even your kindness into a weapon." Keanu picked up the phone, watching the clip with quiet eyes. When it ended, he placed it down and turned to her. "They can say what they want, but truth doesn't live in their words, Sandra. Truth lives in what people feel when they see who you really are." She shook her head. "But how do I prove that? How do I fight against lies without losing myself?" He leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "You don't fight lies with more noise. You fight them by living your truth so loudly that lies can't survive. You don't need to shout, Sandra. You just need to be you." Her chest tightened again, but this time, not with fear, with something like hope. She realized that while the world was tearing her apart, Keanu was building her back piece by piece, not by shielding her completely, but by reminding her of who she had always been. The next day, they attended a fundraiser together. Cameras swarmed as usual, but Sandra noticed something new. When reporters tried to bait her with questions about the accusations, she didn't freeze. Instead, she smiled calmly and answered with grace. She spoke about the cause, about kindness, about hope, never once letting their traps pull her down. Afterward, Keanu looked at her with quiet pride. "See, you don't need me to defend you. You've always had that strength." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but it helps knowing you believe in me." What neither of them noticed was that the moment had already gone viral. Clips of Sandra handling the questions with calm resilience spread across the internet, shifting the conversation once again. People began to say, "She's stronger than we thought. Maybe her story isn't over. Maybe it's just beginning." As Sandra sat in her car later that night, the city lights passing outside the window, she realized something had changed inside her. Keanu hadn't just defended her. His words, his quiet support had forced her to see the truth. She was not broken. She was not finished. And maybe for the first time in years, she believed it too. But she also knew this journey wasn't only about her anymore. The world had started to question not just her strength, but Keanu's too. And if she didn't step forward soon, he would carry the whole weight on his shoulders. She turned to him as the car slowed. "Keanu, maybe it's time I stand for you the way you've stood for me." His eyes softened, but he said nothing. Still, she could see it in his expression. He knew that moment was coming. The final storm broke on a night neither of them had planned for. A major awards gala filled with the brightest stars, the loudest cameras, and the sharpest reporters had become the stage where everything would either collapse or find its resolution. Both Sandra and Keanu were invited to present an award together. They almost refused, knowing the circus it would create. But Sandra whispered as they prepared, "If we keep running, the story never ends. Maybe it's time to face it." Keanu gave her a small nod, quiet as always, letting her decide. As they entered the grand hall, flashes exploded like lightning. The whispers grew louder, people watching their every step. Sandra's chest tightened, but this time she felt something different. She wasn't trembling like before. Keanu's steady presence beside her reminded her that she was no longer standing alone, and maybe she no longer needed someone to shield her either. The night rolled on until their moment arrived. They walked on stage together, greeted by thunderous applause, though Sandra could feel the undercurrent of curiosity, some clapping out of respect, others waiting for a misstep. The host handed them the microphone. Before the award could be presented, a voice from the audience broke through, sharp and deliberate. It was the same bitter colleague who had spoken against her on television. He shouted from the crowd, "Tell us the truth, Sandra! Are you hiding behind Keanu because you're afraid your career is over?" The hall froze. All eyes turned to her. The cameras zoomed in. Sandra felt her heart pound. For a moment, the old fear returned, the instinct to look away, to let silence swallow the pain. But then she thought of Keanu, of every word he had spoken, of how he had carried her when she felt she couldn't carry herself. This time, she stepped forward. Her voice rang clear. "No," she said, "I'm not hiding behind him. I'm standing beside him. Because what he showed me is something I had forgotten. That respect is not something you beg for. It's something you claim by living truthfully." The hall stirred. People leaned forward, drawn by her strength. She continued, her words steady. "I've made mistakes. I've been silent when I should have spoken. I let fear decide too many things. But weakness is not the end of a person. It's the moment you find the courage to rise again that defines you. And if the world only remembers me for one thing, let it be this: that kindness is not weakness, and respect belongs to every soul, no matter how many times they've been broken." The hall erupted in applause. Some stood clapping loudly, others cheered. The cameras caught every moment. Sandra felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't let them fall, not out of shame, but out of strength. She turned to Keanu, who was watching her with a small, proud smile. Then, unexpectedly, she reached for the microphone again. "And as for Keanu," she said, her voice soft but powerful, "he didn't stand up for me to be a hero. He stood up because that's who he is, humble, kind, and strong. The world tries to twist kindness into weakness, but he showed me, and he showed all of you, that real strength is protecting others even when it costs you." The applause grew louder. People rose to their feet, a standing ovation that rolled across the hall like thunder. Cameras captured. Keanu lowering his head slightly, humbled, his eyes glistening. He leaned toward her and whispered, so only she could hear, "You didn't need me anymore." "You've always had that strength," she whispered back, her voice trembling with emotion. "Maybe. But sometimes we need someone to remind us of who we are." When they finally presented the award, the moment was no longer about statues or speeches. It was about something far greater. It was about respect reclaimed, about friendship turned into an unspoken bond, about two people showing the world that kindness could still echo louder than cruelty. The night ended with headlines again, but this time they were different. Sandra Bullock silences critics with powerful words. Keanu Reeves and Sandra redefined strength together. Ordinary people filled social media with messages of hope, sharing their own stories of resilience. And when the lights dimmed and the cameras were gone, Sandra and Keanu sat together in the back of the car, the chaos of the night fading behind them. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Because in the silence, they both understood something simple yet life-changing. They had faced the storm together, and they had come out not broken, but stronger. The world would keep talking as it always did. But for them, the story wasn't about gossip anymore. It was about truth, about resilience, about kindness, and about the power of standing beside someone, not in front or behind, but together.